Abilene has a legacy, so to speak, of almost being behind the times. When I started digging into this issue, I noted that there were, 101 facilities in the United States that were named after Confederate generals, Confederate figureheads, and 4 of those being in Abilene, Texas, with our elementary schools.
And so the 4 schools, it was Albert Sidney Johnston was created in 1957. That was the first one that was created. And that was at the same time that Texas had passed a law saying that you could not integrate without a vote from the public. That was the exact same year that the integration of Mansfield High School became so famous as a national event, where members or citizens in Mansfield hung an African American from effigy from the school, and the Texas Rangers were there to keep African Americans from integrating the school. So that's the exact same time that Albert Sidney Johnston is built and named. It's followed then by Robert E. Lee Elementary and Stonewall Jackson Elementary, and the last of the 4 is John H. Regan Elementary. And again, all 4 of these schools were built because Abilene's population skyrocketed after the creation of Dyess Air Force Base, yet all 4 of these elementary schools were also segregated. That even though it was after Brown, they did not let African Americans go to these schools.
I think it's important that we change these school names because we constantly feel like we're being oppressed when we see these names. I feel like it was a purpose of saying that you shouldn't go to this school.
You would think that these names were at these schools in the 1930s or the inception of these schools, but these schools were actually named this in retaliation to integration in Abilene, and it was done intentionally to let Black and brown kids know that they weren't welcome there.
In my personal experience, these 4 schools, 3 of them being in predominantly minority neighborhoods, Robert E. Lee, I have several family members that went to Lee Elementary, and many of them are split on the name change just because of the nostalgia that comes with a name and the school pride. However, many people weren't really enlightened as to why the schools were named, what they were at the time.
So Abilene their pattern for naming schools has gone through a shift over the years. Originally, the first schools that we had were named after the neighborhoods that they were in. For our junior highs, it was just North and South Junior High because we only had 2. So there was no tying it to people's names. It was based off of the region of the city, and obviously Abilene High was Abilene High because it was the only high school in town. So it was the Abilene High School. So that was the pattern up until the 40s or 50s when they started building new schools, and the next pattern was name it after heroes from the Texas Revolution. That stayed until these schools, specific schools that were brought, that their names were chosen in 1957 to 1961 is when these 4 schools were picked. And we had the pattern up until that point, again, of using people from Texas, and starting with Albert Sidney Johnston Elementary in 1957, and then ending with John Regan in 1961, the school board specifically chose to name it after 4 people with ties to the Confederacy. One of the arguments that was made was that it was about the Civil War, and it was our history, but it really wasn't, because Abilene wasn't created until 1881. So as a town, we didn't even exist until 16 years after the Civil War ended. And that outside of Reagan, those men really had no ties to Texas. Albert Sidney Johnston had moved to Texas, had been here during, Lee had been stationed here during the war with Mexico, but there wasn't a history element of it. The history element of it was specifically, that was a time period when Abilene was actively fighting integration. They were opposing the Brown versus the Board of Education decision, as well as efforts to integrate from members of Dyess Air Force Base because the military had integrated. But on the message side of it, like John Regan is known for creating ideas and systems and plans that would later become part of Jim Crow Texas, specifically to disfranchise African Americans. So the choice of those names and why they're offensive is that it was chosen not because of the people's history with the Civil War or anything about the Civil War. It was to send a message of, we're not going to integrate, that we are opposed to integration.
Listen, when we was over here in the 60s, I came over here in 1960s, 7th grader. We didn't have no air conditioner. Oh man, we didn't have anything. We used old books from the school with 5 and 6 different kids' names in it. We get a book, it's 10 years old. We didn't have computers. We didn't have air conditioning. We didn't have ramps. They didn't care. The white schools had everything. We didn't. They let us suffer. Let's put it like this. This was in the South. Texas is a southern state. It's the largest southern state. And like I said, let's just face it. You had that problem with the color of the skin, period. When they come in with all these schools named after Confederate soldiers, they did it on purpose because they had no idea that they were going to ever have to integrate. This is all white school, the way they saw it back then. But time bring about a change.
Like, we don't want these Confederate names being thrown up in our face every day. We don't want to feel like we're still being segregated. We don't want to feel like we can't take initiative to move forward, to help with our Black communities, to help with the education of our children.
It's a right thing to do. You know, it's not a black or a white thing. It's a right and a wrong thing. And the people that put these name changes out there when they had the wrong intentions. And I apologize if somebody is the descendant of these people or some of these people are actually still living, you know, but at this moment in time, what was acceptable in 1961 is not acceptable in 2020.
As we move forward into the future, I think the time is right, the time is now to go ahead and move forward with progress. And, you know, let's let go of these names of oppressors, so to speak, that have predominated our society, especially in the South.
I believe in a better future.
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 I believe in a better future for Abilene.